News tonight with the fallout from these new details pouring in from today's explosive impeachment testimony from former Trump diplomat Bill Taylor, laying out these new details of an incriminating quid pro quo plot between the Trump administration and Ukraine. We've been going through the details, and here's another that we haven't aired yet. Taylor recounting how that now famous Trump loyalist, Gordon Sondland, was trying to defend the premise of this transactional foreign policy, saying that because Trump is a businessman, when he's about to sign a check to someone who owes him something, he asked that person to pay up before signing the check. I want to get into this with two prosecutors who are real experts on these kind of cases. David Kelly is a former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, often in the news, and Bear Berger is a former federal prosecutor serving in that office as well as the Eastern District. Good day to both of you.
Hello.
How are you?
David also, as I always mention, is a former boss of mine, and if we were in the U.S. Attorney's office, you would be more senior in rank. We'll start with you. Although I prize both of your analysis, what kind of evidence did we hear today?
Well, you heard a lot of damning evidence, both for the president and those folks around him. The question is, from a criminal perspective, what does that do? Is this really a criminal issue, or is it really an issue for, constitutional issue of impeachment? So you really have a misappropriation of money that's appropriated by Congress. And if this wasn't the president who was directing it, I would think that you have, from a criminal perspective, you have federal election law violations, and you might even have violations of making bribes to foreign officials.
So you just listed
FCPA violation.
Well, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Right. So you just listed off, as a prosecutor might, several felonies that could have been committed that you'd at least want to investigate.
Sure.
What does it tell you that under Bill Barr, the Justice Department's immediate public response to this was that there was nothing to investigate?
It sounds to me, and not really having all the facts, but on a glance, it certainly was enough in the whistleblower complaint to dig deeper than they apparently did. So I don't know if it was sloppiness or intentionality that they didn't pursue it further.
Spoken like a very careful attorney.
Like
he doesn't know if it was sloppiness or intentional, but he's saying, and I wonder if you could build on the point, that we keep learning more information that suggests, at a minimum, there was an effort at extorting a bribe. And to the extent that foreign officials were involved, it may be also other laws. Your view?
Yeah, I mean, Taylor's testimony today, I think there's no way that Congress can't find this significant. The quote that you just put up, where he was, describing how Sondland was saying, the businessman writing the check. I mean, if we were in front of a jury and we're trying to explain the concept of a quid pro quo, that may be the very example I would use, right? Of a businessman wanting to, get the payout before he signs the check. I think Taylor really went. And
let's pause on that, and then you go.
Yeah.
The businessman writing the check is spending his money in a transaction. Here, the allegation is that the president is stealing money that's not his. It's U.S. taxpayer appropriated funds to get a personal benefit.
Right. I mean, the conduct is clearly worse than what is set out in that hypothetical. But just to exemplify that, for an administration that has really gone to great lengths to say there was no quid pro right from the get-go, this was a pretty startling description of exactly that.
Yeah, and some of this news has come at us so fast today that we don't have it already when we produce it up. So I have something here I want to read that I know we don't have yet, but it is also from Taylor's testimony because we're getting it as we go. He describes the first time that he heard from government officials, quote, that the money, the security assistance, was, quote, conditioned on the investigations that Trump wanted. Oh, we do have it now. Great. Let me read the whole thing. This was the first time I'd heard the security assistance, not just the White House meeting with Zelensky, was conditioned on the investigations Trump wanted. Is that good or bad?
Well, from a criminal perspective, it's really bad because it's the quid pro quo. It's conveying a thing of value. From a constitutional perspective, it shows an abuse of power, which is the very thing that's contemplated in the impeachment provision of the Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. One thing that really struck me with the reporting from Taylor's testimony today was how important it seemed to be that the Ukrainian president made these announcements publicly. That really speaks to me to this idea of, how you say this was a thing of value. It wasn't necessarily even that the investigation was going to be conducted by the Ukraine or that they were looking into it. It seemed that the import was that this proclamation was made publicly so that it was to get sort of the full bang for the buck so that it could clearly be used as an advantage in running a political campaign.
Right. And you're suggesting that Donald Trump, whose rise to power and whose troubles have come in part from his obsession with the use and abuse of publicity, was keenly, according to this allegation, was keenly interested in getting it out public and boxing in that they would do this Biden probe and say they'd do it so it would ensnare Biden before even the primaries were over.
Well, it's one fact I think that, for example, like a prosecutor could use if you were trying to show that what they were after was something of value that could be used in the context of an election. Making it very clear that this needed to be a public proclamation that they were going to be conducting this investigation would be a factor that I think would be significant in trying to draw that conclusion.
And let me just say one thing. If this was a criminal case, we're talking in terms of a criminal case, which it likely wouldn't be. It would be really an issue for Constitution. But given the evidence, lots of cases don't go to trial in a criminal case because the evidence is overwhelming or sufficient enough to have a conviction. So I doubt that this is a case that would really go to trial. When confronted with all the evidence, a reasonable defendant would likely take a plea.
You're saying someone presented with this evidence, like
it's pretty damning evidence.
Damning slam dunk evidence.
Yeah.
I mean, far be it for me to disagree with the former U.S. attorney here, but yes, it's a strong case.
Well, Mr. Kelly, who, as I mentioned, I know and have worked with, is going a little farther than usual, and I think we're in this moment where we're all kind of saying, oh, the bribe that they admitted to, that the chief of staff admitted to, and now we're getting the actual particulars. It is really overwhelming. I'm going to come back to you in the show because I didn't get to ask you anything about the guy who used to run the office that you ran, Mr.
I doubt
Giuliani.
it's so explosive when we get to that, but let's talk about it.
Oh, that's a great tease for people to keep watching, that it's going to be what? Dry?
No, it won't be dry.
Mundane.
As two people who've worked these kind of cases, it's fascinating. I appreciate both of you, David Kelly and Barrett Berger. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.